I was ankle-deep in river mud, hammer in one hand and blueprint in the other, when the shouting started. "Sir, you can't build there." I turned slowly, already knowing what I'd see. A woman in a visor, pastel windbreaker, and an expression so severe it could curdle paint. She was standing at the tree line, arms crossed, clipboard in hand like she was auditioning for the role of overbearing HOA president in a B-grade soap opera. Except this was no audition. This was Karen Lindell, head of the Pinebrook Shores Homeowners Association, and I was smack in the middle of her jurisdictional fantasy land. Except I wasn't. "Morning," I said, not stopping my work. I'd been expecting this confrontation for weeks. It was practically part of the blueprint. "You need to cease construction immediately. This land is subject to HOA oversight," she barked, marching closer. "And I don't see an approved permit on file." I looked up from the foundation beams. The morning sun glinted off the water behind me, casting the half-framed cabin in a golden glow. The river murmured its approval beneath the banks, unaware it was about to become a battleground. "This isn't HOA land," I replied, calm but firm. "This is my land. My riverbank. My permit." She scoffed. "We'll see what the sheriff thinks about that." And that's when she called 911. From that point on, it wasn't just about a cabin. It was about a fight much older, much deeper, one where boundaries weren't just lines on a map. They were legacy, entitlement, and revenge. But to understand the storm that was about to break over Pinebrook Shores, you have to go back. Before the cabin, before the clipboard, before the flashing lights and the sheriff shaking his head. You have to understand how I ended up owning the river. My name is Luke Barton. 42. Civil engineer by trade. Outdoorsman by choice. I didn't buy this land, I inherited it. From my grandfather, a reclusive man with a love for land, water, and old laws no one reads anymore. He left me 85 acres of forest, field, and flowing water tucked right behind a wealthy lakeside development that sprouted like weeds over the last decade. Pinebrook Shores. Luxury cabins. HOA controlled everything. Gated entrances, drone patrols, and a monthly newsletter that reads like a dictatorship in cursive. I never joined it. Never wanted to. But the borders of their development curved just close enough to my inheritance that people like Karen assumed authority they didn't have. She mistook her clipboard for a badge. I let them have their fantasy, for a while. Until I started building. I wasn't reckless about it. I pulled permits, hired a contractor, and paid for an environmental impact study. But the moment the first post hole was dug, the whispers started. Karen had seen trucks. Tools. Movement. She asked neighbors if they knew who was squatting on the riverfront. And then came the foot traffic. HOA board members in khakis and polos wandering too close to my tree line. Cameras aimed at my construction site. One guy even tried to inspect my septic tank before I chased him off with a rake. It wasn't just nosiness. It was fear. Because they hadn't checked the records. They didn't know. I didn't just own the cabin. I owned the entire river it sat on. Every bend, every inlet. From the headwaters 3 miles north, down to the old mill pond where it met the lake. My name was on the water rights deed, a document so old it was signed in fountain pen. That deed was about to become the most powerful tool in this war. And Karen? Karen was about to learn what happens when you try to rule a river you don't own. Next time, the sheriff arrives, the truth surfaces, and Karen's HOA dream starts to unravel. The sirens started about 10 minutes after Karen's call. By then, I had packed up my tools and was sitting on the tailgate of my truck, sipping coffee from a thermos like it was any other Saturday morning. Across the clearing, Karen paced near the start of my gravel drive, phone glued to her ear, muttering phrases like unauthorized construction, riverfront disturbance, and my personal favorite, possible environmental terrorism. I wish I were joking. 2 squad cars rolled up, lights spinning lazily. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that shade of blue brushing the green of my woods, but it was the first time they'd come with backup. Both vehicles parked in a V formation, like they were preparing to storm a compound. Out stepped Sheriff Doug Atwell, a man I'd gone to high school with, who still wore his mustache like a state-issued accessory. He approached slow, cautious, as Karen followed behind him like a rooster puffed with indignation. "Luke," Doug nodded, eyes flicking to the half-built cabin behind me. "We got a report of unauthorized construction and possible trespassing." I motioned toward Karen with my thermos. "She report me for building on my own land again?" "She says it's HOA jurisdiction." "Does she now?" Karen stormed forward. "This man is erecting an illegal structure on regulated land. He's disrupting wildlife habitats. And he's not a registered member of the HOA, which means he's required to submit for review before making any alterations to community-adjacent properties." Doug blinked. "Community adjacent?" "Yes," she said, brandishing her clipboard like a sword. "According to the Pinebrook guidelines, any property touching common environmental preserves must be reviewed by the board. It's in Section 4. It's not in any law that matters," I cut in. Karen wheeled on me. "Excuse me?" I pulled the old leather folder from the back of my truck. Inside was the deed. My grandfather's signature. Water rights and land boundaries marked with careful ink strokes. I handed it to Doug. "Before she gets you wound up, maybe read this." Doug took the folder, stepping aside for a better look. I could see his expression change in real time, the furrow in his brow smoothing out, his mouth twitching in surprise. He flipped through the pages slowly, then glanced back at me. This deed includes the river." I nodded. "All 3.7 miles of it. From the north bend to the mouth of the lake. Including the banks, under state code. My grandfather secured it back in '76. It's private. It's mine." Doug scratched his jaw, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this supersedes anything your HOA says." Karen's face drained of color. But he's building on the riverfront." Doug handed her the folder. "Which he owns. In its entirety." There was a pause. A beautiful, echoing silence in the clearing. Then Karen thrust the folder back like it burned her. "You don't understand, this development depends on shoreline uniformity. If he builds that cabin, it'll disrupt the view from our south boardwalk. That decreases property value." "Still not illegal," I said. "Then I'll take it to county zoning. We'll file an injunction." Doug shook his head. "Won't do much. This deed's airtight. And if I'm reading this right, the HOA's actually trespassed on his land multiple times." Karen's jaw clenched. "You've got trail cams, don't you?" Doug asked me. "4 of them. I've got footage of HOA surveyors stepping 5 feet past the boundary line last month. And Karen here was caught tagging one of my trees with pink tape last Tuesday." Karen's mouth opened. Then closed. Doug took a breath. "Ma'am, if you or your board members set foot on this land again without permission, you could be looking at trespassing charges. I suggest you make that very clear at your next HOA meeting." Karen looked like she might explode. "This isn't over," she muttered. "No," I said. "It's just starting." She stormed off, retreating up the drive, heels crunching like broken promises. Doug stayed a moment longer, handed me back the folder, then chuckled. "You always did find the weirdest ways to make a statement." "It's not about making a statement," I replied, watching Karen's car peel out of sight. "It's about making sure people like her remember something important." Doug raised a brow. "What's that?" I smiled. "You don't own what you never earned." Next time, Karen tries a legal maneuver and discovers too late that the river runs deeper than her power trip. The next letter arrived 3 days later. Typed in all caps on embossed HOA stationery, it was hand-delivered by a teenager with earbuds in and an expression that said even he knew this was nonsense. "You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all construction on property bordering the shoreline adjacent to Pinebrook Shores, pending investigation of environmental violations and view obstruction per Article 7, Section C of the Pinebrook Guidelines." I read it twice and laughed so hard my dog Ranger came trotting over to check if I was okay. Karen was doubling down. The letter was signed by Karen herself, along with two of her usual lapdogs, Pauline Fairbrooks and Chad Mercer, who between them had once tried to ban patio umbrellas because they weren't aesthetically unified. What they didn't know, what Karen still refused to grasp, was that her HOA guidelines had no jurisdiction over my land. None. Zero. Pinebrook Shores stopped at the tree line. My property didn't just start after that, it extended into the river itself. The land her letter called shoreline adjacent was mine all the way to the far bank. Still, I kept the letter. I was building a file thicker than her HOA handbook. But I knew Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And I was right. 2 days later, a black SUV with tinted windows and county plates pulled into my clearing. A man in khakis and a utility vest stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Barton?" he asked, polite but guarded. "That's me," I said. "Let me guess, environmental review?" He nodded. "Got a formal request from the Pinebrook HOA to assess potential waterway violations. Normally this would be a state-level issue, but the county asked us to take a look since it's a smaller body of water." I gestured toward the river. "Help yourself. But I hope you brought boots." He was respectful, I'll give him that. Walked the perimeter, took notes, snapped photos, even complimented the erosion barriers I'd installed. Said most folks didn't bother with that kind of preventative work. After an hour, he returned, a little muddy but visibly less tense. "Honestly," he said, flipping through his notes, "this looks better than most of the sanctioned builds we review. You've followed riparian buffer guidelines to the letter. Whoever reported you either doesn't understand the law or understands it just enough to weaponize it," I finished. He raised an eyebrow. "Ah. One of those." I handed him a copy of my grandfather's deed. "Before you leave, take a look at this." His eyes scanned the document, then widened. "You own the water? Every drop between the markers." He whistled. "Well then. I'll be submitting a report. No violations. And I'll note this isn't within HOA jurisdiction. Appreciate it." As he left, I could already picture Karen seething over her next cup of herbal tea. I didn't have to wait long. That weekend, I drove into town for supplies and found a flyer posted on the community board outside the local grocer. "Urgent HOA meeting, emergency session to discuss river encroachment crisis." At the bottom, in bold font. "Community presence required. Defend our shoreline." It had Karen written all over it. I circled the date. It was in 2 days, held at the Pinebrook Shores Pavilion. A building paid for by HOA fees and used mostly for wine tastings, bingo nights, and whatever else bored retirees needed to feel in control of something. Now it would be the stage for Karen's crusade. I didn't RSVP. But I planned to attend. Not alone, either. That night, I called someone who knew the land better than anyone alive besides me, my cousin Jake, a surveyor with a mean streak and a drone license. The next morning, he showed up with topo maps, flight footage, and a mischievous glint in his eye. "You really want to play this out at their meeting?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "No," I said. "I want to end it at their meeting." He smiled. "Then we're gonna need a projector." When the night of the HOA meeting arrived, the pavilion was packed. Karen stood at the front in her signature lavender blouse and matching folder, flanked by Chad and Pauline. A slideshow already blazed across the screen, photos of my cabin foundation, zoomed in with red circles and dramatic captions like "visual pollution" and "potential runoff zone." She was midway through a rant about preserving the pristine view from the south boardwalk when I stepped in. Conversations dropped. Chairs squeaked. Karen stopped mid-sentence. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the front, placed a USB drive on the table, and nodded at the AV volunteer. The screen blinked. A topographic drone scan filled the wall, 3D renderings of my land, the river, the HOA boundary markers, and the state-registered waterway overlays. Then came the deed scans. Then the video footage of Karen stepping onto my land, tagging trees. Gasps rippled through the room. I stepped forward. My name is Luke Barton. I live outside Pinebrook Shores. This river, and the land around it, is mine. And I have the deeds, the permits, and now your own meeting footage to prove that your HOA has repeatedly overstepped its legal bounds. Karen opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. You don't have to like the cabin. But you can't stop it. And if I see one more drone, one more flyer, or one more inspector sent to my property, I'll be filing for harassment. With a civil attorney who already has this entire mess documented. Then I turned to the crowd. Enjoy your meeting. And I walked out. Behind me, the room erupted, half in applause, half in scandalized whispers. Karen's kingdom had cracked. Next time, Karen's final move involves a media stunt, but it backfires in the most public and poetic way possible. The Monday after the HOA meeting, the phone calls started. Not from the HOA. From reporters. It began with a local columnist from the Pinebrook Ledger who left me a voicemail full of overly excited questions. We heard about the deed. Is it true you own the entire river? What's your response to the HOA claiming environmental damage? My response? I deleted the voicemail. But they didn't stop. By Tuesday, 2 more reporters had reached out. A TV crew even parked outside the Pinebrook Shores gates, looking to catch a glimpse of the so-called River Baron. That's what one outlet called me. A guy on Facebook turned it into a meme, my face photoshopped onto a steamboat captain, cigar and all. I wasn't thrilled. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. But I knew exactly who was stirring the pot. Karen. See, I'd underestimated one thing, Karen's ego. After the HOA meeting imploded and I walked out with every resident whispering her name like it was a swear word, she didn't just retreat quietly. She pivoted. She called the press. Only this time, she went too far. On Wednesday morning, a glossy 2-page spread appeared in the Pinebrook Weekly titled, HOA Heroine or Power Abuser? The River Controversy Dividing Pinebrook. It was something. There were photos of Karen smiling next to the shoreline, gesturing nobly at the threatened view. A sidebar listed fictional infractions I'd committed, none of which held legal water. The worst part? She claimed I was siphoning off river access for private luxury, despite the fact that she'd never stepped foot near that part of the river until construction began. But the piece de resistance was a quote in bold letters across the center spread. All I've ever wanted is to protect the river for the people who actually care about it. Karen Lindell. That's when I lost it. Because Karen doesn't care about the river. She cares about control. I decided if she wanted this to play out in public, then we'd do it her way, but better. So I called in a favor. My old college buddy, Gabe, works for a local environmental nonprofit. We hadn't talked in a while, but when I explained the situation, he laughed for a full minute before saying, "Let's make a field day out of it." Friday morning, I invited the press to my event. I called it a walk with the river. It was simple. Gabe would lead a small ecological tour of my property, explain the conservation efforts I'd undertaken, and let the reporters film whatever they wanted. I gave them full access to the buffer zones, to the erosion mitigation work, to the native plant restoration I'd been doing since last spring. The irony? I was doing more to protect the river than anyone in Pinebrook. The press arrived mid-morning, 5 reporters, a camera crew, and a drone operator. Gabe had posters, stats, and even a slideshow about the river's health. I stood back and let him do his thing. Then, halfway through the walk, Karen showed up. Wearing a pastel hiking outfit and oversized sunglasses, she strode into my clearing like she was arriving at a gala. 2 Pinebrook board members trailed behind her, looking like they regretted every decision that led them there. One of the reporters spotted her immediately. "Ms. Lindell. Over here, do you have a comment on the restoration project?" She didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'm glad to see the river getting some attention, finally. Though it's unfortunate that this effort only began after our community raised concerns. Gabe raised an eyebrow. Actually, we've been working with Mr. Barton since last year. The grant for the Native Species Program was approved before construction even began. Karen froze. I stepped forward. Care to see the permit dates? One of the reporters tilted his head. Wait, are you saying this entire environmental initiative was planned before the HOA got involved? Gabe nodded. Yep. This property is actually a model site for private conservation work. Very rare in this county. Karen's eyes darted. I wasn't informed. I turned to the cameras. Because she never asked. She just assumed. That's what this whole situation has been. Assumptions. Power grabs. And a refusal to accept boundaries, literal and otherwise. The reporters ate it up. Karen tried to pivot, to take credit for raising awareness, but the damage was done. The footage aired that evening, complete with clips of her fumbling through statements while I stood beside erosion control nets and rain barrels. The headline? River dispute turns, conservationist shuts down HOA allegations. But the real cherry on top came 2 days later when the county zoning board issued a public letter confirming the cabin build met all regulatory standards, and that Pinebrook Shores had repeatedly overstepped its jurisdictional boundary without cause. Karen had officially lost. Next time, with her authority crumbling, Karen makes one last desperate attempt, this time involving a mysterious land survey and a forged signature. But what she doesn't know is that I'm already 3 steps ahead. I thought the worst was behind me. After the media firestorm, after the environmental tour, after Karen's carefully curated lies crumbled on local television, things got quiet. Eerily quiet. The HOA stopped sending letters. No more clipboard inspections. No new drone sightings over the cabin. For a week, I worked in peace. I poured the last of the concrete for the deck supports, installed the reclaimed wood siding, even sat out by the river one night with Ranger, finally allowing myself to believe it might be over. Then the envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in tight cursive, taped to my front gate. Inside, a folded map, highlighter marks, and a note written in all caps. You are trespassing on HOA land, Section F, Parcel 22. Remove all structures or face legal action. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was worried. But because of the gall. They'd redrawn the borders. The map was a reprint of the original county layout, but modified. A dotted line had been added, rerouting the HOA boundaries so it conveniently swallowed a quarter of my land, including the cabin site. The parcel numbers had been changed, the ink still fresh enough to smear. I flipped the page over. A signature, George A. Lanning, County Surveyor. But here's the thing. I know George. He's my uncle's fishing buddy. A man who plays poker with a face like granite and once beat me at Scrabble using the word xerophyte. So I called him. George, I said, reading the signature to him over the phone, did you redraw the Pinebrook boundary map? There was a pause. Then a low chuckle. Son, he said, I haven't touched Pinebrook's maps in 5 years. Why? Because someone forged your name on a fake one. Dead silence. You have that document? He asked. I'm staring at it. Keep it safe, he said. And don't do anything yet. I'll handle this. 24 hours later, I was in a conference room at the county records office. George sat across from me, his face a masterclass in controlled fury. Beside him, a county attorney reviewed the fake map, her lips pressed into a line so tight it looked like a scar. This is felony-level forgery, she muttered. We traced the map's origin. Turns out it had been submitted 2 days prior by, no surprise, Karen Lindell, through a local land use consultant she'd hired independently. Her claim? That Pinebrook Shores had always intended to include the Riverside Strip as a buffer zone for community preservation, and that the original maps were erroneous due to oversight. She was trying to rewrite the borders by burying a lie in paperwork. But she didn't count on George still being alive. Or bored. Or furious. By the end of the day, the county attorney had issued a formal cease and desist letter to the Pinebrook HOA and Karen personally. The letter included words like fraudulent, unauthorized submission, and criminal investigation pending. I took a copy home, framed it, and hung it in the cabin's entryway. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and the river gleamed like polished glass, I sat with a glass of bourbon and watched a pair of ducks drift lazily downstream. Then came the knock. Karen. Wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses like she was entering a spy movie. "What do you want?" I asked, stepping out onto the porch. She removed the glasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I made a mistake." I blinked. She stepped forward. I thought I was protecting something. Our community. But it got personal. And then, it got out of control. "You forged a government document." Her chin trembled. "I didn't draw it. I just signed off. I didn't think it would go this far." "But you wanted it to." She didn't deny it. "I wanted you gone," she whispered. "You made us look small. Irrelevant." I leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You made yourself look small. I just didn't let you rewrite the story." She looked up at me then. And in that moment, I didn't see the clipboard-wielding tyrant. I saw a woman terrified of losing control. Not of the neighborhood. But of her own identity. "I've already resigned," she said. "The board accepted it this morning." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of crickets and the river sliding past. "I hope you find peace," I said. "Really?" Karen nodded, turned, and walked back to her car. She never came back. But this story wasn't over yet. Because with the HOA imploding and the river safe, something unexpected began to happen. The neighbors came. Not with complaints, but with questions. Curiosity. Help. Next time, the surprising aftermath, how one cabin, one river, and one battle reshaped a whole community. And how I discovered that the river I owned could still teach me how to belong. It's been 6 months since Karen stepped off my porch and vanished from my life. The cabin is finished now. It sits proudly at the bend in the river, a timber-framed sanctuary hugged by mossy oaks and crowned with a rooftop deck where I drink coffee in the mornings and bourbon at night. It's not extravagant. No marble countertops, no satellite dish, no HOA-mandated color scheme. But it's mine. And it's enough. At first, I thought I'd build the cabin, settle in, and shut the world out. But something strange happened once the dust settled. People came. First, it was Roger and May Whitcomb from down the hill. Roger brought me a sack of firewood and a 6-pack. "Heard you outmaneuvered Karen," he said with a smirk. "About time someone did." Then came Ellie, a retiree from Pinebrook Shores who'd never dared question the HOA before. She brought banana bread and asked, genuinely, if I'd teach her how to install solar panels like the ones on my roof. The trickle became a stream. Folks I'd never met showed up curious, humble, even grateful. Turns out I wasn't the only one Karen had tried to bulldoze, just the only one who pushed back hard enough to stop her. And then there was the kids' camp. That started with one call. A local teacher named Mr. Leary had heard about the river project. "We're looking for a place to teach our students about ecology," he said. "Somewhere real." So I said yes. Now, once a month, a yellow school bus bumps down my gravel path and unloads 20 wide-eyed kids armed with journals and bug nets. We walk the river, test the water, study the trees. They ask questions. They laugh. They learn. And sometimes, they just sit on the dock and listen. The river has that effect. One afternoon, a girl named Janelle turned to me and said, "This place feels like it's always been waiting for us." She was right. This land, this water, it wasn't just property. It was memory. My grandfather used to say rivers remember things. They carry stories downstream, let time smooth out the sharp stones, but never forget. This river remembered every fight I had with Karen. But it also remembered why I stayed. And then, one morning, something else floated downstream. A small, water-warped clipboard. Plastic cracked. Paper long gone. Probably knocked loose from a dock or a canoe, maybe even a forgotten relic of Karen's reign. I pulled it out, turned it over. There, faint but visible, was the imprint of a Pinebrook Shores logo. I didn't laugh. I didn't scowl. I just tossed it in the fire pit and watched it burn. The river flowed on. I'm not naive. I know another HOA president could rise. Another Karen might walk into my life someday, armed with rules and righteousness. But now, I have more than a deed. I have community. Because by protecting my land, I gave others permission to protect theirs. And that, more than property rights or zoning laws, is what truly defeats tyranny. So if you're listening to this wondering if you should fight back, if you should push past fear and say not today, not here, let me tell you what I learned. Own your river. Whatever that means for you. Because there's something powerful about standing where the current meets the land and knowing, without question, that you belong. Even if someone with a clipboard says otherwise.